Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to probably misbehave and go over here, so you can still hear me all right?
Tilt the mic up.
Tilt it up in this way. How's that? Is that a little better? Marvelous. Okay, they tell me I have 45 minutes, so I'll try and fill the 45 minutes. I can't guarantee you that it won't be 49, but we'll see what we can do, and I'll try not to put you to sleep. Before I get to launch into the formal part of the presentation and the slides and exercise, I just want to highlight the fact that most of the data I'm going to talk about is Atlantic Canadian specific. But that being said, if you're from Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, all of these trends apply to you. The only two Canadian provinces that are probably going to be exempt from some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are Alberta and British Columbia. And they're exempt only in the part that they're not going to feel the pain as badly as the rest of us, but they are going to see a different economy than they've been used to over the last 50 years. So that's my opening gambit on that exercise. So I've entitled my talk today, Where Have All the People Gone and Did They Take Their Stuff? The Where Have All the People Gone is a talk that I've been giving now for the last 4 years. It's about the demographic shift and the potential implications for various parts of the economy. So I've given this talk to governments, I've given this talk to municipalities, to the federal and provincial governments, to the home building industry, and that's where the second part of the title comes in, and did they take their stuff? Because of course the last 4 or 5 slides in each one of these presentations talk about the impact of that demographic shift on the various groups that I'm speaking with. So hopefully the last section of this talk, at the very least, will be of some interest to you. Let's see if I can convince this thing to work. There we go. So first, about AIMS. We are an independent, nonpartisan economic and social policy think tank. We're a non-profit. We have charitable status in Canada and the United States. We take no money from government. Let me just reiterate that again because we are in Atlantic Canada. We take no money from government. We are funded exclusively through charitable donations from individuals, corporations, and philanthropic foundations. What we do are we initiate and conduct research. We communicate that analysis and those findings via freely available publications. So our website, www.aims.ca, is free and available to anybody who wants to use it. And email newsletters. So for example, you could go on our website and subscribe to our beacon. We sponsor and organize conferences and seminars, and we deliver talks and engage with people like you. So one of the key differentiations, of course, between AIMS and somebody like APEC or some of the other government organizations is all of our research is available to anyone who wants it for free. Economists don't like that because, as a general rule, they call that economic free riders. So generally lots of people can access our stuff without having contributed to the cost, but that's a risk we accepted when we set ourselves up. Now, economic and social policy think tank. What exactly is that? It's wonderful words and phrases, but it's easier to understand if we think about it in this way. My background is in political science, so I tend to use political examples. In this case, I'll talk to you about Winston Churchill. Churchill used to say that politics, which was his business, was the art of the possible. And what he meant by that was that politicians can only achieve what the public was allowed or prepared to accept at a given time. And so think tanks exist to do an even more fun task, which is to redefine the possible. We get to influence the people who influence politicians, who set up the boundaries and the guidelines. We get to basically take the box, rip it apart, and throw it away. And so we are in the business of ideas. For the most part, we are not a lobby group. We're not an advocacy group. We don't talk on behalf of our board. We don't talk on behalf of big business or small business. We're not interested in forcing change for change's sake. Our job is to look and ask the very simple question, what is the best public policy in a particular area, and to put it out there to as many people as possible. The objective being, of course, that we have the ideas and then we help people like you make the changes happen. So, enough about AIMS. What are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to have a quick introduction to demographics. I promise I'll try only to put half of you to sleep through that exercise. I'll emphasize the point that this is a global problem, not a local problem. So that gets back to my introductory comments around the fact that this isn't something that people in Quebec or Ontario can ignore. It will hit Atlantic Canada particularly hard. We'll talk a little bit about the implications for society and the economy. We'll talk about the fact that we can't avoid these demographic shift. It is what it is, and it is going to do what it's going to do regardless of what else we get up to over the next coming years. And then we'll talk hopefully in some interesting terms around what could all mean for you. So here's a few things that we all know about population, right? One is that the global population continues to expand and it's uncontrollable, and some people think that at some point we're going to run out of resources and it's all going to starve to death. Getting away from the second half of that statement, yes, world population continues to grow in certain areas. North America is one of the areas in the globe that population is not increasing exponentially. You still have population explosion in Africa and South America and to a certain extent in India, but even in China their population growth is in decline. They will reach a cap of their population and start to decline in a net number within the next 10 years. That's the added bonus of their one-child policy and their preference for male children on a cultural basis. So, world population continues to grow, only in certain areas. Number two, things we all know. Unemployment is the single biggest challenge for society. Not even close. Particularly not true in Atlantic Canada. It hasn't been for years. It is still the case to a certain extent in some areas of the country, Alberta and British Columbia in principle, but unemployment is no longer a problem. The labor shortage, systemic labor shortage, the inability to find and hire and train qualified staff is going to be the single defining employment issue of my generation and my children's generation. The questions that the baby boomers dealt with around where do we put all these people to work are simply over and done with. And it's going to require an entire restructuring of the way we build government, the way we do business, the way we interact in politics. And that redefinition is going to be hard and difficult, and it's going to impact us all, no matter what industry we're in. The third thing we know, well, you know, immigration can solve all these problems. The fact that we haven't had enough kids or that we're not as productive as we could be, it's okay. We'll just bring in, you know, an extra 1,000 or 2,000 immigrants and things will be fine, get back to normal, we'll tax them a little bit, we'll be okay. Not a chance. It just doesn't work that way. We'll talk a little bit about some practical numbers around immigration, but the simple fact is, if you take a look at the New Brunswick population crunch, in order to solve the demographic shift in New Brunswick, they would have to replace the entire population of the province on a 10-year cycle. So think about that. That's 750,000 people that they'd have to bring in every 10 years. By the way, Nova Scotia's average intake of immigrants over the last 20 years has been 1,200. So 750,000 people in 10 years. This is one of the tools that economists use to kind of present this demographic problem. And one of the demographic problems, of course, is that for every person that you have to have someone who's capable of working to develop income and resources to take care of them, meet their basic needs. So this is what's called a dependency ratio. It's the number of people who are available to sustain another individual. So in this case, if you look at Africa's dependency ratio in 2000, it was 117.9. That meant they had about 118 people who could then take care of approximately another 100. So we had basically every working person had about 1.2 dependents. So think about that. Dependents are either children under the age of 16 or people over the age of 65, people who are not in the workforce, not capable of buying their own food, building their own houses, those kind of things. In 2050, this will almost be an inverse of what we're experiencing today. So North America's dependency ratio, which is around 2 just before 2000 and 195 in 2000, will have dropped to 1.6. So we'll have 1.6 workers for every dependent. So we're going to have basically our dependency ratio. Africa, on the other side, of course, currently in 2000 and still today, they have significantly more dependents than they have people capable of working. So, of course, that creates huge societal problems that they are basically incapable of responding to. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the problems on the African continent come out of the fact that they don't have people of working age to sustain the rest of their population. Yes, they have some challenges around the rule of law and those kind of things that we have the luxury of. And so the negative impacts of a bad dependency ratio will be less here than they have been in Africa. But here's an interesting point. Does everybody remember the Celtic Tiger, right? Back in the late 80s, early 90s, Ireland was basically a terrible place to live. There were no jobs, there was no economy at all, and then they turned themselves around. Well, there's arguments about whether that was tax policy, education policy, healthcare policy, whether it was transfers from the European Union. Two Harvard economists about 5 years ago discovered a very interesting thing about Ireland. The turnaround in their economy happened almost 15 years to the day from when they changed their abortion laws. So by reducing their dependency ratios, by actually increasing the number of people they had working versus the number of people they had under 15, they created an environment in which they were able to turn their economy around. These two Harvard economists have estimated, using ridiculous mathematical formulas, that basically about 60% of the turnaround in Ireland can be entirely tracked to that single policy change. So dependency ratio is a powerful indicator of what's going to happen in your economy. And we'll talk a little bit later about what the dependency ratio and the dependent structure is going to look like in Canada and how that's going to impact your industry. Here's population. Not only do you have to worry about the dependency ratio, how many people do you have to take care of folks, but you have to worry about how many people you're going to have, period. This is Stats Canada, and Stats Canada is, of course, conservative in their estimates, so they have a low, medium, and high growth. Take a look at those numbers. We're talking about 2005 to 2031. By the way, they've got a new projection out since then, since this one was put out, but it's basically the same sort of horror story. In Newfoundland, they're talking about a net decline in population even under their medium growth proposal. So the idea that if it grows even faster than they expect it to, they're still going to see a drop of somewhere around 10,000 in their population. Same thing in New Brunswick, they're talking about a low growth projection, and in Atlantic Canada again. If we don't do something about our growth potential, our total population is going to continue to decline. So think about this. We're going to have an overall population decline, and we're going to be older, and we're going to have fewer kids, which means we're going to have higher bills for the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to jack up a whole bunch of debt, and there's nobody going to be around to pay for it. Now, many of you may not necessarily be around then, because death comes to us all at some point, but you will be leaving significant debts for your children and your grandchildren to pick up. And of course, there'll be fewer of them, and many of them will leave as well. So here's the Atlantic population share. This is what Atlantic Canada's population share is the rest of the country. You see that the Atlantic population has grown and continued to grow through from 50 to about 1996. We reached a cap in about 96, and we've been falling ever since as a percentage share. And in fact, while our population was growing, our percentage share has been declining almost from the same period. So 1951 on, our net population number has actually gone up, but our percentage share as a percentage of the overall Canadian population has been in decline. Anyone who wonders about federal transfers, about electoral policy, about why it is that we don't get our fair share, to use two words that I hate, of federal money, this is the answer. There are fewer voters here, there are fewer electoral seats here, so we matter less in Ottawa. So when a politician or a government operative tells you that the solution to your problem is in Ottawa, you have a bigger problem than you had 5 minutes before. This is our age profile. This gets to the fact that we are going to get older over time. So we're talking about, in 2006, about 63% of us fell into that sweet spot, the working age population, 20 to 65. We were earning money, we were paying taxes, we were buying and renting, say, self-storage space. By 2036, we'll be at 54%. So half of our population will be working age. The other half will be dependents. They will be people looking for other people to take care of them.